A closed sort is providing students categories in order to organize information such as quotes. In this example, in this video, I'll show how to make a closed sort using quotes from 7th grade by Gary Soto. The two topics that are shown here are Victor is mature and Michael is immature. Students can all receive quotes on separate pieces of paper, such as a post-it note, but probably larger, like slips of paper, which you'll see later. And then in their small groups, they can take quotes and then place them in the appropriate categories. Many of the texts that we use in school can be found on Google. For instance, if I type in 7th grade text, I'll find this PDF. I can scan the story and find any kind of quotes that support the ideas that I'm trying to prove. For instance, proving that Victor is a mature person. When I read the story, I notice this section right here. I can highlight it, copy it, and then paste it in a Word document. I forgot to mention in the previous video, it's probably best to read the story throughout before trying to find quotes. That way you have an idea of what themes you can use for the sort. I started copying some other quotes from the story, and if you notice, sometimes when you copy from a PDF, you have to make some changes here, so you can take care of that after pasting. So you can take your quotes, change the sizes of them. I found that sometimes it's easiest to make the quotes like size 18 or 20, and then that way when you print them out, you can make cuts in between the quotes and then give those out to each group. Now that you have some quotes picked out, such as these that I printed, you can start showing the students how to do the sort. I suggest before you do this activity, you might want to make sure that your students understand the difference between text evidence and explaining evidence, because you will be using that throughout the activity. So I find a good way to start off with this activity is to start with the teacher-directed time, and at that time you could state the categories. Then you could also have the teacher read part of the story as the I do, and then start having some students read as well during a whole group reading. And as you read, try and identify some quotes that would support those themes or categories that you described, and start informally finding those quotes. Once that's done, you can move into just before the student-directed time. And as a preface, you probably don't want to read the whole story in one shot. Just work with 1 or 2 pages, so that way you're focusing on the skill. But the I do time, you would start off by showing a quote. For instance, this is a quote that I could project in the classroom. And in this quote, the character Michael is scowling at girls because he thinks that it makes him look cool, and Victor thinks that it looks kind of strange. So as the teacher in the room, I would read this quote out to the students and then do a think out loud strategy saying, well, it sounds like Victor is acting older than Michael because he thinks scowling is kind of silly. And then I would show that this proves that Victor is more mature. I would then take that quote, and then in my classroom I could put it underneath the correct category. And you can do this a few times depending on your student's comfort level, and then you want to start giving some freedom to the students and having the whole class have that discussion for a few different quotes. And I find that it's good to have students give their own opinions, especially if they disagree, as long as they have ideas that support their disagreements. Once it looks like the students understand how to do the activity based off of the we do time, you can then prepare students for breaking into small groups. I find it's great to prepare them first by doing a Y chart. And a Y chart, you would have look, sound, and feel. And I think the best Y charts are the ones where students come up with the ideas. But you're welcome to direct them towards more specific answers. For instance, looks like students sometimes usually say something that's like looks like fun. However, if you can direct them towards more specific language like engaged, leaning towards speaker, eye contact. For sounds like talking about activity, and for feels respectful, you can bring up that sometimes people have disagreements and we can disagree. However, we should disagree respectfully, and that's something that can be modeled before breaking into small groups. I find the Y chart is also helpful when, if you have a few students who are off task, you can prompt that student specifically and say, Johnny, remember to make eye contact, or things of that nature. Once students are broken into small groups, then you can hand out all of the quotes that you prepared, and each group can have the same quotes and work on different categories or same categories depending on your comfort level and also your student's skill level, and circulate the room and see what responses students place. A lot of this may require a great deal of modeling. I've noticed that a lot of students in our building don't know how to discuss with each other their ideas. So once you break your students into small groups, you may want to model one more time what it looks like. Great way for that is you can scaffold this activity a week in advance and do something like a think, pair, share, which is very scripted, and then that's preparing them for the skills they would use in small group time. A couple of final tips. The first is when you do make your quotes, it's helpful if you include the page number on them. That way students can do lookbacks and then see the quote within context of the text. Um, you may also want to, didn't do it here, but when you copy the quote, try and add quotation marks on the outside so that way it looks more like text evidence. And if you are using something that is dialogue, you may want to turn those dialogue marks into single quotation marks or apostrophes rather, and then you can put the quotation marks on the outside along with the page number. Uh, Another tip is to have students answer with an opening sentence, and also give their text evidence and explaining with sentence starters. We have a lot of posters that have those sentence starters, so that way you can get your students into the habit of using that language. And lastly, if you want to challenge your students, if the group is pretty experienced with these skills, you can also include completely unrelated quotes, and then that way you can have those discussions where sometimes text evidence just doesn't fit what you're trying to prove.